Welcome to my latest video, and today I'm really excited to bring you my first ever interview slash chat with someone who's literally moved from their own country to Japan and lived there for a good length of time. Today we're talking with Michael, who back in 1996 moved to Japan using the JET program. So without further ado, let's get over to the chat and see what his experiences were like and what advice he can give, and see what insights he can provide us today. So let's get over to the chat and have a look. Let's go.
Okay, so great. Thanks, Michael, for joining us today to have a chat about your experiences in Japan. Tell me, no problem at all. Nice to have you here. And so tell me what's happened around you going to Japan then. How did that start off and get going then?
Yeah, well, so for me, going to Japan was something that I had wanted to do from the time I was a kid. I actually have some Japanese heritage. I have a Japanese maternal grandmother. So from the time I was a kid, that was just something that I'd always wanted to do. Finally, at university, I had the opportunity to study the language. I studied it for 2 years, which is not really a lot of time to study a language like Japanese.
Definitely not, though.
But it was. But my studies were pretty intense. I spent a lot of time. I really poured myself into the studies, and I was fortunate. The university that I attended in Montana, there were a lot of exchange students from Japan, and so I had an opportunity to interact with native speakers and to kind of, hone my language abilities to some degree.
Yeah.
And my final year at university, I found out about an opportunity to go and to work in Japan through something called the JET, the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program.
Yeah.
Which basically, it's been around since the 1980s, and it's just a program through which native English speakers can go to Japan and work in the public school system as language teachers. So that was a great opportunity for me. It allowed me not only to fulfill the dream of getting over to Japan, but also to have a means of income. I'd always wanted to go to Japan as more than just a tourist. I really wanted to immerse myself into the culture. So that was a great opportunity. Because there was a sister relationship between the state of Montana and the prefecture of Kumamoto, which is in the southern part of the country. That's where I was assigned. And I was assigned to a relatively small rural area, which is actually, that had been my choice. I wanted to go somewhere not in a large urban area. I didn't want to be in Tokyo or one of the large cities. I wanted to go somewhere in the countryside that would kind of force me to have to use the language on a daily basis. And just to experience that, what I perceived as a more traditional kind of Japanese side of the culture. And so I ended up there in 1996 for what was originally going to be a 1-year teaching contract. But I loved it so much there. I just kept renewing the contract for the maximum amount of time. So I ended up staying through 2000. So I was there from 96 to 2000.
Okay, so 4 years. Is 4 years the maximum time you can spend with the JET program, is it?
Yeah, actually at the time it was 3. So I spent my first 3 years in the JET program, and then in my final year, I actually I married a Japanese woman. She was actually a teacher in the school, one of the schools where I was teaching. So I stayed for an additional year, and during that year, I taught English at a local, like a community college.
Okay. So that was a different experience again compared to the JET program. So you were probably in the community rather than hiding behind the JET program. Was that a lot different than that final year?
The final year?
Yeah. When you're working in a different environment, teaching English.
Yeah. So I was still in an environment that was familiar to me because I was still in the same geographical area. So I still had sort of the network of, the network that I had built over the 3 years. So it wasn't too much of a transition. and there was a big decision to make. At that point, I thought maybe I would end up staying permanently. We did end up eventually coming back to the U.S., but over the years, we've been back several times to visit, my wife's family. And so even though it was I have to remind myself that it was actually more than 2 decades ago that I was in the JET program. It doesn't feel like it still feels like the recent past to me. But because we've been back so many times since then, Japan is still very fresh in my mind.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, your wife will want to go back to see your family as regularly as you possibly can, and obviously, if you like Japan anyway, you will want to go on holidays yourself anyway. So, makes sense.
Yeah, I could definitely see going back and being quite happy living there.
Okay, great. Glad you've had that great experiences there anyway. Obviously, finding your wife as well, which makes the experience even better, I guess. Finding a life partner.
Yeah, that was
yeah.
just an unexpected bonus.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you don't. I guess you didn't go there to find that. It just happens. You just get on with someone really well, and ends up that way, which is great.
Yeah.
So, okay, great stuff. Great stuff. So, you mentioned the JET program. It's quite a well-known program for people wanting to go to work and live in Japan. I think, especially for the younger people. I think if you're just leaving university, I think they have an age limit of 30, if I remember correctly. At least when I've looked at the JET programs, the age limit 30. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit older than that, unfortunately. So I can't use the JET program, unfortunately, unless it's an extreme case. Tell me about how you applied for that. Was that quite an easy thing to apply for? Did they sort of help you with visas and accommodation and stuff there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about the program was that once I was accepted, the program and the Ministry of Education of Japan pretty much handle all of those things. The work visa,
Okay.
The travel arrangements were all taken care of. The flight arrangements and so that part of it was nice, not having to deal with a lot of the red tape.
Yeah.
Getting into the program was not, I wouldn't say it was easy. I mean, there was certainly an application process that was quite involved. In addition to the paper application, I also had to make a 3-hour drive from Montana to Spokane, Washington, for an interview before a panel of judges.
Okay.
So it was not an easy process, but it was definitely well worth it. Like I said, the program's been around since, I believe, the mid 80s, 1980s. When I was there in 96 to 2000, that might have been, at least from my understanding, that might have been sort of the peak of the program. At the time I was there were, at that time, I believe, about 6,000 JET participants spread throughout all of Japan. Today, I think it may be as few as 2. The numbers have gone down. I think for economic reasons, a lot of the municipalities in Japan have had to consolidate. So where there may have been, multiple schools in a region, there may now only be one. So I think that's one of the reasons why the program is a bit smaller, but still, they still employ thousands of English speakers throughout the country.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting program. And if I was a little bit younger, that'd be an option for me to at least get into Japan and
yeah, I mean, I was already in my
mid-20s
at that time, and most of the participants were fresh out of university. So even I felt a little bit like the old guy.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that now, even in my own city. I'm in university. I'm 43, and the normal age for a university student is there's less than half of that, early 20s, 18 to 22, I think, in the UK, something like that. So I'm a lot older than the people I'm spending hours with now, spending my days with now, and to then
Having
go.
Said that, there were a lot of people that I met, other English teachers who were outside of the JET program, who were there working for other large English schools, because that's a huge business in Japan. There are English schools throughout the country, and so I met people your age and older.
Definitely. There's definitely an option where I think if there are similar programs out of the JET out there that the English teaching, that where if I can't get a job in my degree major, then I will go down the English teaching route instead. So I'm doing sales and marketing. But if they don't need sales and marketing people, there's no jobs out there, or just find it impossible to get a job for whatever reason, then I will definitely go down the English teaching route. I've done that little bit of that online, so with mainly European
Right.
people, but it's not face to face in the classroom with native Japanese speakers. I did have one Japanese lady living in the UK, but she was already good at English anyway. He was just practicing conversation with her, so
Sure.
I can talk till I'm blue in the face. So, but yeah, great. I'm glad you've had a great experience anyway. So, I mean, you've said you found the language quite difficult as well. You said you studied for 2 years before you. Was that before you went over there, or while you were there?
So before I went over, I had 2 years of the language at university, and
Okay.
I would say it was just enough on which to build a foundation. It was a foundation that was just enough to allow me to get by when
Yeah,
I got there. But of course, upon arrival, I realized there was so much more that I needed
yeah,
to
yeah,
learn, especially because I was in an area in the South where there's a bit of a dialect
yeah,
that's a bit different from what we would call standard Tokyo
yeah,
Japanese. So I had to kind of get used to it, the dialect, and get used to sort of the jargon of the educational world. Like school language. Being
yeah,
in a school environment. Um, just learning vocabulary for things like teacher's room, or
yeah,
homework, or playground, and all the different vocabulary specific to that environment.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I mean, being fully immersed the way I was for that amount of time, I certainly, by the time I left, I felt very confident in my ability to have, conversations on, on different levels. And I was able, actually, the degree of fluency that I developed, I was able to come back to the U.S. and teach Japanese here, which I did for many years. So it was a big life changing, experience, even in what I was able to bring back home, with me.
yeah. Of course, yeah, of course. I mean, I wish I could get a Japanese course for myself in the university and get to at least that basic level. Because I mean, I think especially during the pandemic, they're not doing as many, at least face-to-face stuff as what they were. A lot of it is online, and there are plenty of websites like the one I was using to teach English, where you can find Japanese tutors all over the world, even in Japan. Obviously, it would be awkward with the time difference. I think it's 9 hours between Japan and the UK at the moment.
Right.
So it's kind of awkward with the time frame, and if they're not confident with their English, it's hard for them to teach me as well. With pronunciation and knowing enough English themselves, so that can be quite hard. So so a lot of the time I'm trying to learn it by myself, but again, with the vocabulary, it's so many words you gotta learn. I haven't even looked at kanji yet, so just being able to know enough words, vocabulary to have a basic conversation,
Sure.
they just don't stick in my head whatsoever. I can look at them for hours and hours every day when I've got the time, when I'm not studying and working or whatever,
Yeah, I
and
understand.
go back to them the next day, and I'll hide the Japanese word and look at the English one and think, okay, what's the Japanese word for that? And my mind's gone blank, even though, yes, the day before or a couple of hours earlier, I could go through all these words, these 10, 20 words or whatever, and remember them all. My memory's terrible, and I just get frustrated and leave it for a
My
couple of
problem,
weeks.
yeah,
Yeah,
my problem was often
yeah,
confusing two or more words that sound very similar.
yeah. And
Um,
there's a lot of them there, I've noticed. I guess there's a lot, same with English, American English or British English. There's a lot sound similar.
sure.
I mean,
And then of course
yeah,
you have the challenge of the written language and
yeah,
recognizing all of the characters, and that's another,
yeah, yeah,
that's probably the area where I'm a little bit weaker is
yeah,
with reading. But just after over time, you learn to recognize certain characters that are just things that you
yeah,
see in everyday life. Like emergency exit or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to learn the hiragana, katakana stuff. Then there's the kanji, you can learn the basic stuff, but then it's more complicated when it's the combinations and stuff you don't see very often, like I said, and it's quite difficult. I think
Yes.
leave kanji to the last, I think, or at least learn the
Kanji
basic.
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm dreading it. I mean, I've got books here, but I'm like, I'm leaving them. I'll just try and learn vocabulary now, and a bit of grammar, so at least I can have a conversation with people. I think that's more important to me than the writing, because a lot of writing, I think, has become digital anyway. If you send a text message or an email or
Sure.
a Facebook status, it's easy to use Google Translate or a translation thing somewhere. So that's quite easy to do. But yeah, if you need to know
Yeah,
it,
when I was there, the internet was just becoming
yeah,
the thing that
yeah,
it's become, and so it was actually when I got there, it was still, I remember when I sent my very first email was in Japan, and that was still kind of a a
yeah,
relatively new thing.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
a lot's changed.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Everything's online though. They can do everything online that you can think of now, can't you? Pretty much. So yeah, definitely. So great stuff. So obviously you've had some great experiences over there. You obviously met your wife there, and maybe met some family that you had over there and things like that. And maybe made some friends. Was there any negative experiences over there? Things you thought you knew before you went over there, or
Yeah, I mean, I guess there was sort of that honeymoon phase when you first arrive and everything is so new and so novel and sometimes even almost surreal,
yeah,
because just being immersed in the culture that's just so different.
yeah,
Um, and to some degree, there's a little bit of a celebrity status that many of us Westerners might enjoy when we go,
yeah,
especially where I was located. There really were no other foreigners in the area.
yeah,
And so there was that, sort of like almost yeah, I guess you'd call it like a celebrity status that you enjoy. But then, after a while, that kind of wears off, and then real life starts to set in.
yeah,
Um, and as far as negative experiences, yeah, I mean, there were those moments where language and cultural barriers proved to be some degree of obstacle to something
yeah,
that I was trying to communicate or something that I was trying to accomplish. And sometimes that frustration that you feel when your language age and your biological age,
yeah, yeah,
there's a
yeah, yeah,
discrepancy there, you
yeah,
know. Um, but I guess the uh, maybe the biggest challenge was just trying to find a sort of balance between um, sort of immersing myself in the culture and also having um, because being part of the group, for example, is a very important aspect of the Japanese culture,
yeah,
whereas having private time and and time for oneself is an important part of my American culture. And sometimes there was just a challenge finding a balance between the two. So for example, like during the week, I was in my village during the week and working and visiting schools. And, just the nature of the job was that I was interacting with so many people within the community.
yeah,
And by the end of the week, I felt mentally and physically exhausted
yeah,
because there's a certain degree of concentration that's required when you're trying to,
yeah,
uh, to sort of process everything that's going on around you
yeah,
in a different language, especially. So on the weekends, I would really enjoy just kind of jumping on the train and heading up to the city and meeting up with other, English speaking, colleagues
yeah,
from the US, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand. Um, and so for me, that was the balance that I needed, right? I needed to kind of, at least on the weekends, kind of escape and put myself into a different, a more relaxed environment. And there were times when people in the village were a little bit disappointed that I wouldn't stay
yeah.
and sort of participate in activities that were going on, in the village on the weekends. But that was just something that I had to, I just had to find that balance.
Yeah, yeah. I think they can. I think eventually they kind of like you said, there's a honeymoon period. I think if they eventually understand that you're not Japanese, or a lot of people who go there from the country have no connection to Japan whatsoever, and kind of need time to themselves or to be with people who speak their own language from their own country and things like that as well. So they probably, even though they might have been frustrated, that maybe were there times where they became understanding of that, or was it just? they were just shocked that even 4 years in, they were like, "Oh, we need to come and do this stuff on the weekends."
Yeah, I mean that, and it really depended. There were certain individuals who were very understanding and
Yeah,
were perfectly accepting of my needs to kind of do those
yeah,
things. And
yeah,
there were some individuals who were not
yeah,
as understanding about that. And so that was another thing I learned, is that, even though there may have been a tendency for me to think about the Japanese in a collective way, you
yeah,
soon realize that there are personalities that vary,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
within a culture.
Okay, great, great. So yeah, something I'm trying to learn is the cultural intelligence as much as the language and things like that as well. So what is that like day-to-day life like? And doing what you've mentioned, where if the stuff on weekends, if I just want to relax or go spend time with other English speakers and do my own thing, would it be might potentially cause a problem? And I guess for the most part, that it could potentially cause a problem if you got the wrong people there who won't like you go in. If most people are like that, then they could potentially cause a problem where you kind of got to do things on the weekend. But yeah, it's an interesting thing that I wouldn't probably have
Yeah,
thought too much about. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
I learned to kind of say,
yeah,
I want to take advantage of the time while I'm here, and I want to go out and explore some other areas
yeah,
of the country. And I think
yeah,
people were generally very
yeah, yeah,
understanding of that. But there is a, especially in a small community like where I lived, uh, there was this uh, sort of a sense that you were obligated to join in as many of the sort of community activities as possible. And so I just made a point of joining in as many of them as I could.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
At the end of the day, just for my own mental health, I had to find that,
yeah, yeah.
that balance.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you were never doing it every weekend or every spare time you had, you were off doing your own thing. Then it maybe it would have been a problem then. But if you were say every other weekend or a couple of weekends a month or whatever, you were doing stuff in the community on the weekends in your spare
Yeah.
time, then I guess that
And
definitely would have helped. Yeah,
as you may know, I mean, part of the Japanese culture is that the, a person's social life is very much intertwined with the professional life. And so, even a businessman might be expected to go out with his colleagues, during the week, go out drinking.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's common thing about Japan, where there's a lot of after work drinking with colleagues, and going to the bars and for a meal or whatever, socializing with each other, which
and so that,
is
that was that was
uh,
a challenge for me.
yeah,
Sometimes I would have
yeah,
to go out with other teachers, and we would
yeah,
be out until 2 o'clock in the morning on a school night, and I'd say, hey, I
yeah,
have to go deal with little kids in the morning.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
do
yeah.
that with a hangover.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So it's something I need to get used to, especially now being a bit older. When I was in my 20s, like you were in Japan, I could maybe have a few drinks and it wouldn't affect me too much in the morning. But yeah, I think now when I'm 43, I don't drink as much as what I did back then. And I'm like, if I need to go out and I'm 10 beers into a night out, I might not wake up the next morning. I might feel absolutely disgusting. So, but yeah,
At
something
some
I'll,
of the parties, there's a tradition where you give someone your cup and they drink from your cup, and
okay.
I'm guessing that's not happening very much now, especially with with the pandemic. But I learned that it's okay to just sort of make the gesture of drinking, and you could even dump the drink out into a bowl, or it's
Yeah,
just making the gesture that's important. You don't actually have to consume the beverage.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely in the last couple of years, it's definitely you wouldn't want to drink somebody else's drink.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not happening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's definitely more open than what it is in the UK. Anyway, seems to. I've got a couple of friends that are following Instagram and stuff over there, and it's definitely more open than it seems than I thought it would be from news as well. There's definitely things open that if you watch, say, the BBC news over here, it's like, and it's about Japan. They've closed their borders. You can't go there. Everything's shut. When I follow some Japanese people I've found on Instagram and stuff, or people who live in Japan, like other YouTubers as well, they're doing a lot of stuff that you wouldn't have thought possibly. They've just closed their borders. You can't go and work there and go on holiday there at the moment. But in Japan, everything's fine to a certain degree. So yeah, I guess
Yeah,
there's still precautions. But
yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that even some of my former students are now in Japan, either studying, or I have one who just went over on the JET program.
okay,
So despite all of the issues, things are still functioning, and that's encouraging.
okay. So they've gone over during the pandemic.
Yeah, I have a student who
Okay,
just went over this past October to
okay,
start his assignment in the JET program. So that was
okay.
good to hear.
Yeah, great, great. I'm glad there's still letting some people in at least. So that's good. It's good. I'm glad. I wish your former student luck. Hope they're enjoying it as much as you did. So
Yes.
great stuff. So cool. So we covered quite a bit there. We obviously the JET program and what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy, a little bit about the language, how you learned that and stuff, what you struggled with, and a couple of other things. Is there anything else you can add, or something you've wanted to say, and any advice you want to give anybody about moving to Japan
Yeah.
or anything like that? Or
I mean, I guess on the large scale, I would just say the best advice is just to be very open
yeah,
and just know going over that you're going to experience things that are going to seem bizarre, even surreal, and just to kind of just be open to that and just be prepared for that and to just sort of embrace it and enjoy the experience. And a lot of the sort of finer details, I think those are things you kind of figure out as you go. Like when I first arrived there, I realized that one of the things my house did not have was an automatic coffee maker, and
okay,
so that was one of my first purchases was to go out and
yeah,
get a coffee maker. But then over time, I learned to enjoy green tea, just as
yeah,
much.
yeah.
Um, but just kind of getting a feel for your environment. There were certain things like knowing when the banks are open, when the cash machines are available, and one good piece of advice, I'm sure it's still this way even all these years later, but is to always have some cash on your person,
Okay,
or keep a certain amount in the house, because at least compared to the West, it's still very much a cash society. So there, many places, especially smaller restaurants, and when you get outside of the big cities that don't use credit cards as much. So it's always good to have cash.
yeah.
That
I
was one
think
lesson that I learned.
yeah. I think there's certain times of the year. I think I might be wrong. You might be able to say different to you. At certain times of the year, the cash machines don't work. You can't get any cash out. Like between Christmas and New Year, for example,
Exactly.
you can't get any cash. They just don't work.
Yes.
So
Yeah, that happened to me. So I was
uh,
without for about 10 days.
yeah. So yes, the things like that where that's kind of why I think stuff I know about, but I've learned about from Instagram or YouTube video or whatever. But is that actually the case? This is why I kind of want to do videos with people like yourself who've been over there. Does this actually happen? Is this actually the case? Is it that different? Is it? I mean,
Yeah.
there's always YouTube videos about the tiny apartments you see in Japan as well. But that is guessing that's mainly in the bigger cities like Tokyo. You'll find the tiny apartments and other things as well. But you might be able to say something different about that. Was it? So you weren't in a big
Right.
city. You were in somewhere more rural, by the sound of things, more countryside. Were there still them
Yeah.
tiny, small apartments you get there?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I had a house that actually came with the position, and
Okay,
it actually had been the local the town police department that they
okay,
converted into a home.
okay.
And so I had for a single occupant, it was actually a fairly a decent sized home, and I even had a washing machine, which is not an electric clothes dryer, which is
Yeah,
not something that everybody has. But I know when I visited friends in the city, that situation was quite different, where it was a small apartment, um, and things like a washer or dryer. If either you had to buy your own, or you had to go to the local coin laundry.
yeah,
I know key money is a big thing. I don't know if they do that in the UK, but key money is about the equivalent of 3 months rent that you have to pay up front, and any damages that are incurred to the apartment would come out of that key money when the
yeah,
lease is over.
Yeah, we call it a bond money, so that kind of covers the things like you mentioned, like damage or things like
Right.
that. So if you did leave and you've knocked a wall down or damaged, broken a window, or if you haven't paid your rent for a couple of months, then they'll take it out of that bond money. But it's the same thing. You just call it key money rather than bond money, so it's the same thing. So
And I know a lot of things that I found, to be strange as an American, some of my British colleagues did not find quite as strange, because I guess there's some situations that are similar, being, a smaller island nation.
yeah,
So like, for example, with apartments, I was surprised that, most appliances people bring and take with them, like refrigerators,
yeah.
and things of that nature. Um, but yeah, I like I said, living in the country, I had I guess a slightly more, more convenient situation.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Yeah, yes, that definitely. It's when we are moving home or apartment or wherever, we take everything with us. All the white goods, the fridge, the cooker, freezer,
Right.
everything that goes with us, the bed, everything. Where maybe in the US it's different again. That's a whole other video talking
Yeah.
about American culture
Yeah.
compared to yeah,
Usually the appliances stay.
yeah. Yeah, it's something that's yeah. I guess I guess I might be wrong, but compared to American stuff, with American stuff, it's usually a little bit bigger than what you find in America. In the UK, it's usually the size and a half. Homes are bigger, appliances are bigger, everything. Cars are bigger. So it's harder to maybe transfer them from one home to another. Maybe they're too
Sure.
heavy or too bulky to do. So maybe that's
Of
part of it.
course.
So I went to New York a few years back, and everything seemed to be double the size. Even a car, we have, because maybe because it's an island nation, your cars are quite compact. You can get 4 people in it, but the cars in the US, you can fit 3 people in the front, and 3 people in the front in the UK
Right.
is probably illegal. You couldn't fit 3 people unless you want to sit on a gear stick on the manual drive. Is You're going to be pretty uncomfortable and or pulled over by the police. You're not supposed to be sitting over there. So, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
well, yeah,
there was definitely an adjustment in terms of things in general just being smaller,
yeah,
including, even the clearance of doorways. I mean, for the first couple of weeks in my house, I was, banging my
yeah.
head against the top of the doorway.
Yeah, I'm quite lucky with that. I'm quite short for, I guess I'm only 5'4", which is, I don't know, do you do feet or centimeters?
Oh,
I don't
we do feet, but I had to,
feet.
because that was one of
Yeah,
the first questions people would ask me, is like, how tall are you? How tall are you? And I had to quickly figure that out in centimeters.
yeah, I'm 5'4", about 166 centimeters, which way you want to look at it. So I'm probably very Japanese sized, I guess. More Japanese sized. If I was over 6 foot, then I'd be definitely, I'd stand out if I was over 6 foot in Japan. But 5'3" is kind of, I'm okay. So
Yeah, I'm 189 centimeters, and so that was
yeah,
actually a bit, that was a disadvantage
yeah,
there.
yeah. You definitely stand out and you got that kind of things and stuff. So leg room, and if you go to the movie theater or whatever, bit of leg room, maybe all these things they build for Japanese sized people. They don't accommodate maybe so much for the taller people, I guess.
Or the many times we had to sit somewhere where there were no chairs. We had
Yeah.
to do the floor seating, and that got to be
Okay.
a
Yeah.
little uncomfortable.
Yeah. I bet. Yeah. I bet. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that might be a thing where that's a benefit for maybe going to the bigger cities where they'll have more taller people there, foreigners that are a little bit taller, and they can accommodate a little bit more. But again, that's if you didn't spend that much time in Tokyo or Osaka or Yokohama or whatever, then to experience that, then
Yeah.
cool, great stuff. So
I was very glad that I did have the opportunity to get to some of those places, though, because
yeah,
that's a very different world, and so I think it's all very much worth seeing. So,
yeah,
any of your listeners that end up in one of the big cities, I would definitely encourage them to at some point get out to the countryside and see
yeah.
what smaller town life is like.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something I want to do. So, I mean, what I want to go to Japan and just stay in the big city. If I ended up in Tokyo, for example, or one of the big cities, yeah, there's a lot there. But even in such a beautiful country, it was a lot. This country is a lot more than Tokyo. A lot more amazing places to go and see. Then why would you just stay in the one place? So, same if I went to the US or any other country, I wouldn't just stay in where I am. I'd want to go and explore the country a little bit more. Which,
And unlike the U.S.,
uh,
the train system in Japan is very
yeah,
it's a great system. It's
yeah,
even in my little town, there was a train station, and I could jump on
yeah.
the train and be in the city within an hour or two. So getting around by train was very convenient and not terribly expensive.
Yeah, good, good. I'm glad it's very easy. 'Cause I don't have a driving license. I can't drive at the moment. So if I was to go there without a driving license, it'd be nice to know that it will be easy to get around if I needed to. So I know in Tokyo the train system was pretty good. Probably the best I've seen even compared to New York and London. It seemed a little bit higher, a little bit better, and again than them two cities.
That's another
But
a piece of advice I could give is with the
yeah,
driving. I Before I went to Japan, I got an international driver's license,
yeah,
which is good for 1 year. So I never actually had to take the Japanese driving exam.
okay,
So for those who are only going for a year, that
yeah.
that's a pretty good option, is to get the international license.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's definitely an option. I mean, I need to learn to drive first, get a license for my own country, then before I can get that. So, I mean, I'm gonna not be gonna move over there for 18 months. So that's something I'm definitely thinking about, is getting a car that'll be even easier to get around
And at
to.
least at least you'll be on the
So,
same side. I had to learn
yeah,
how to drive on the other side.
yeah. Or if you having to learn to drive, even though I think it's all manual in Japan. Is that correct? It's all manual driving. You
It's
don't.
not. No, everything's pretty much automatic. But the car that I
Okay,
drove was a manual, so I had to
okay,
learn to shift with my left hand.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
That was tricky.
Okay. Yes, in the UK it's all manual, which is why I got confused maybe. But yeah, it's all manual here. So going from that to automatic
Interesting.
would be easy. Just a matter of pushing a button or whatever, and just going into
Right, right.
drive would be easier. You can get automatic driving lessons here, but I think they may be more expensive. And if you will, but because they're not as common, if you wanted to buy an automatic car here, then they were a bit more expensive because they're not very common. But that would be the other way around, obviously, in places like the US where automatic and is more common. Obviously, Japan as well is more
It's
common.
actually yeah, it's actually difficult to find manual cars, which I
Yeah,
prefer myself.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's no common thing is automatic. So I would, if I was going to do driving lessons out here, it will be more expensive while I'm learning. But once I'm in Japan, it'll be easy just to jump in the car and go. I just need to know the signs, the kanjis for stop and things like that, the city names and wherever I'm going.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It was not always easy driving.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, whenever I had the choice, I always preferred to jump on the train. That's for sure.
Yeah, I just from thinking about learning to drive simply because if I know some areas of Japan can be quite remote and hard to get to from other areas on using public transport. So if I could drive, even though there might be longer drives, then that would be easier to get to the more remote areas of Japan. But I might be wrong, but it might be easier just to use public transport places. I don't know. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean the highway system is good, although that's a little bit at least compared to what I'm used to, is a little expensive.
okay,
There's a toll anytime you jump on the highway. There's a toll.
okay.
Um, I don't remember if it was like that in Britain or not.
No, no, it's all pretty much. You pay a road tax, which usually
Right.
covers anything like that pays for the roads. So if you have any car, obviously it depends on the car. I think the smaller cars are generally pay less tax because they less wear on the roads. I guess if you got a big huge tank, then you're paying a lot more.
Right.
It all depends on CO2 gas, so environmentally friendly it is, and that type of stuff, where you can pay cheaper insurance, cheaper road tax, and stuff like that.
I think my time in Japan made me a better driver because I had to visit some of these schools that were located in these on these mountaintop
Yeah,
locations, and I had to drive up these very windy, twisty, narrow roads. And halfway up, there would be a logging truck coming down, and I would have to stop and reverse and find some small little,
yeah. Little
some
cabin as well.
small
Yeah,
little outlet to let the truck get by. So yeah, driving there, that's not among my fondest memories, but
okay. That was just mainly the difficult areas were where when you were in more countryside, more rural, up in the mountains, were the more difficult when the roads were a bit narrower and more treacherous.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Right. Okay. That's something to think about. I might just stick to trains then, so just to see what happens. But yeah, great. Great. Obviously, that's more insight from you. So thanks for that as well. So cool. We could obviously talk for hours by the sound of things, but I don't want to keep you for too much longer. Is there anything else you can add, or anything else you want to say or tell us about before we finish up today?
Uh, like I said, I mean, I think it's just really important to just go and just really be willing to immerse yourself in the culture. I know when I was there,
Yeah.
the people who had the best experience were the ones who were really just willing to be open to different things, and those
Yeah.
who were not so open to new experiences, they did not really have as good of a time.
Okay.
They were the ones who were always looking for like the nearest McDonald's.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
um, which
Yeah.
which actually can be interesting, going to things
Yeah.
that you're familiar with and seeing how they are different. The
Yeah.
Japanese version is different, but just immerse yourself in the things that are distinctly
Yeah.
Japanese.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I went to Tokyo, like I said, I was only there for 6 days. I avoided the famous fast food places like McDonald's, Burger King, KFC. I avoided them because they were obviously I could get them in the UK. Oh, yeah, maybe slightly different, but I can get them. I think there's like 4 McDonald's and 3 KFCs and like 2 Burger Kings, literally 20-minute
Right.
walk from my house. So I can get that anytime and it's quite cheap. So why would I travel halfway across the road to eat a Big Mac or a Whopper when I can get that here? So if I'm in Japan, I'm going to eat sushi and ramen and uh, Japanese stuff instead, and so it's common sense for me. But if people want something familiar, then go and have a McDonald's. But you may as well stay at
and
home.
and and another little piece of advice is, when you go, it's always good to bring like a certain number of small items that can be used as gifts,
Okay.
because there is a big part of the culture is, when you move into a new place, that you have some small gift that you can give to your neighbors.
Okay.
So if you're in an apartment building, maybe that's just maybe some of the neighbors in the neighboring apartments, or
Okay.
maybe just homes, or even people that you work with. There's a Japanese word for that, omiyage, and
Okay.
they can just be small sort of trinkets, really. You could bring over a bag of pencils with British flags on them. It's
Okay.
just some sort of token gift, as a way of just sort of, yeah, just showing your appreciation for being there, and just bringing us something from your home
Okay.
country and sharing that with the group.
Okay. So that's a good tip as well, because that's not something I would have thought of. I probably would have maybe thrown a party and invited everybody. But
Well, that works too.
it
Yeah,
works
that
too.
works
Yeah,
too.
get a few beers in, a couple of bottles of sake or something, and come and have a party, guys. I got some British biscuits here for you, so it's going to eat some.
Perfect.
Uh, or biscuits or
Yeah,
cookies
that
for if you're
works.
American. Cookies if you're American. So biscuits is different there. So so great stuff. So obviously thanks for that advice. We'll hopefully take that on board. So obviously thanks for everything you said tonight, and been interesting to hear your story. And thanks very much.
It's my pleasure.
Great. Okay, what am I doing here now? I need to stop recording, don't I? I'll edit this bit out.
Well, there we go. What a great chat I had there with Michael. A lot of great information there about his time in Japan. A lot of great insights and advice there about going there with an open mind, and what it was like to learn to drive, and things like that, and his experiences with the JET program as well, and what it's like in Japan. So a lot of great information there. So thank you again, Michael, for taking the time to have a chat with us today and recording this video. So I really appreciate that. And just to add on as well, Michael did mention that he did end up teaching Japanese when he went back home after. If you have a look in the description, I have posted some contact details for Michael. So if you're interested in having Japanese lessons with Michael, feel free to get in contact. I have put his email in the description, so if you want to get in contact with him, feel free to do that. And he has actually written a book as well, a historical fictional book called Mataru. So if that's something you're interested in, again, there's a link in the description. If you want to pick that up to have a read, feel free to do so. He will really appreciate any support you can give him with them two ventures. And obviously feel free to also leave comments if you've got any questions for Michael, anything you want to say about the video at all, as nice as possible. Obviously, then go ahead and leave them in the comments, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can with any answers that may be there to give you. And if you haven't already, if you have enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this from not just Michael but other people who have made the move to Japan and lived and worked there for a period of time, click the subscribe button, click the notifications as well, so you get notified of when I upload a new video, and then you won't miss out on anything that will come out. And then you can learn as much as you can about what it's like to move to and live in Japan as possible from many different people and walks of life. So thanks for watching, and again, thanks to Michael for doing this. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for watching, everyone.